It would be practically impossible at this point to make a ranking list about RPGs without mentioning what many people would consider the GOAT, Baldur's Gate 3. It's an absolutely massive and sprawling adventure that takes place over 3 acts, all of which are filled to the brim with hours and hours of top quality content. But for me, what really makes this game so special is the reactivity. It feels like for any action you can think of, no matter how big or small, there is a highly produced, fully voice acted, or gameplay heavy way in which the game radically realizes you. You can turn into a spider in order to talk to spiders about uprising against their captors, or if you choose to play as a drow when you first enter the goblin camp in Act 1, rather than having to fight your way through hordes of devilish creatures, they simply cower in fear as you easily walk past, due to your race's notable harsh nature in the underground. Each and every interaction you have in game is filled with moments like this, and every mission, whether that be from the main story or one of the side gigs, can be solved in quite literally any way you can think of. There are even people online who have stacked hundreds of boxes into the air and climbed up all of them in order to get to higher levels of a castle to invade it unseen, or others who made mile-long explosive barrel connections to kill the entire goblin camp without having to even walk in the front. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of immersive Sims and the same reasons I love those games. But what Baldur's Gate 3 does so well is that it marries these genres perfectly, that being deep CRPGs and also very intricate immersive Sims, and makes an experience that really puts the role-playing back in role-playing games. Having the freedom to choose exactly what you want to do, whether that is in dialogue or combat, is so exhilarating. And I actually really love how every action you take depends on the roll of the dice, meaning sometimes, even if you're fully kitted out, something crazy can happen, and it really makes the narrative and everything happening way more dynamic. Especially because once you realize how open-ended the journey is, it makes you excited to come up with strange solutions for how you're going to solve everything. For me, it's just the perfect example of everything that an RPG should be. It's to the point where I could think of pretty much any other game on this list, and I would prefer that it had the same game philosophy and design and gameplay approach of Baldur's Gate 3, even if I actually like their stories better. And that's because the design of Baldur's Gate 3 is all about radically realizing whatever you do as the player. It's the holy grail of what RPGs were meant to do in the first place. After all, they're based on Dungeons and Dragons, somewhere where you kind of can do whatever you want. Because that's what makes RPGs special in the first place. The ability to create our own characters and tell our own stories, or have an effect on the world that truly feels real, with deep gameplay mechanics for combat and leveling up our characters. That way we can make them really our own. Funnily enough though, despite all I've been saying in the rest of this list, I actually think that the writing in Baldur's Gate 3 along with its world might be its weakest part. I personally find the universe of Dungeons and Dragons so boring, dull, and generic. And when you combine that with almost Marvel-esque quips and one-liners along with companions and NPCs that are all extremely over-sexualized, the gravity of the plot and the main story really loses a lot of luster, instead being traded out for an experience that is more akin to actually playing at a Dungeons and Dragons tabletop with friends, all the wackiness included. It's for sure something that a lot of people enjoy as well, but for me, I tend to gravitate more towards serious narratives and plots that take place in worlds that bring up grand philosophical questions and answers, like say the Pillars of Eternity universe, or places that are extremely funny and just fun, like say Wasteland 3. Regardless though, in spite of the lackluster world and writing, something I value very highly in my RPGs, don't get me wrong, the rest of the package in Baldur's Gate 3 is executed at such a high level that it's hard not to put it this high on my list. Having this much dialogue, this much content, so many options for how to tackle each situation can only happen when you have a developer who is fully focused on making the best product they can with lots of long hours and passion behind it. And truthfully, no other RPG in history has really had this much depth, while also having this high of a production value. And for that reason, Baldur's Gate 3 stands alone in a league of its own, that hopefully will push the industry and the RPG genre forward for decades to come. It's one of the all-time great RPGs without a doubt, even with its flaws, and stands as a testament to how much one studio can really change the gaming landscape. I've said it countless times now on this channel, and I'll say it again. 2017's Prey from Arcane Studios, and even more so its DLC Mooncrash, are the most underrated video games of all time. And it goes without saying, must be played by everyone before they die. You see, when Prey was originally released many years ago, it was met with some of the worst review scores for a AAA product, including a 6 from GameSpot and a damning 4 out of 10 from IGN. In gaming, scores like this are essentially a death sentence, and they even initially dissuaded me from trying the game for some time. But to my surprise, when I finally got around to playing this elusive title, I was met with one of the most fascinating and memorable experiences in a game I've ever had. First of all, the introduction to the game, which I won't spoil, is my favorite of all time, no question. It instantly makes you realize what kind of experience you have in store for yourself, that being a psychological masterpiece, and the pacing only increases from there. Built from the ground up as an immersive sim, my favorite genre of games, Prey excels on the premise that every single place and thing you encounter is a sandbox in and of itself. Every location is meticulously designed to allow sneaking, shooting, climbing, hoisting, or hacking. And each gadget or weapon you unlock has multiple uses as well. For example, the glue cannon, which you can find early on, can be used to freeze enemies in place to allow you to land critical melee hits. But it also can be used to craft makeshift bridges that open up entirely new areas even at the start of the game. I remember on my first playthrough, there was an escape pod high on the ceiling of a specific area I was in that was supposed to only be accessible by traveling all around the space station of Talos 1 and finding keys and overriding passwords. But using the glue cannon, I was able to literally spend 30 minutes slowly building a bridge that I climbed through in mid-air to the escape shuttle, which rewarded me with a secret ending dozens of hours before you're even supposed to beat the game. Things like this are what games are all about: exploration, discovery, immersion, and rewards. Finding out that you can actually break the game like this makes it so much more enjoyable because it shows the developers respect your intelligence and allow you to come up with solutions on your own rather than being confined to a linear experience. Another great example of this would be the Huntress Boltcaster, a Nerf-style crossbow that shoots little rubber bullets that barely do any damage. At first glance, this seems pretty useless, but soon you discover that it allows you to shoot through small crevices to hit computer screens as if you're touching them. Meaning if you spend the time and have the patience, you can from many yards away turn on automated defense turrets to kill enemies or unlock doors by hitting a button that's out of your reach. But what if you're out of ammo? Well, with high enough strength, you could rip the door open or move heavy objects to stack them and climb on top. With certain powers, you could even transform yourself into a small cup and roll your way through an opening in the window into an area you want to be. Every single objective in Prey has countless ways to solve it like this. No matter what you choose to upgrade or which stats and weapons you choose to bring into battle, you will know beyond a shadow of a doubt there is always a way to move forward as long as you have what's most important, your mind. And that sense of freedom and immaculate game design gives you a special feeling the entire time you play Prey. A feeling that more games should be like this, designed from the ground up with agency and expression of the player in mind, i.e. immersive sims. But if you thought that was good, then the DLC Mooncrash only takes this formula to even greater heights. And it's so sad that barely anyone has even played this DLC. The DLC adds in a time element, which I sometimes can be apprehensive of in games. Mooncrash takes everything that the base game does and turns it up to 11. There are dozens of new items and obstacles, new enemies, and an entirely unique location with a gameplay loop where you must try and get all of your party members off of a moon base before disaster strikes. Through each run of Mooncrash, you strategize which characters to take into the base in which order, as they must all go in one by one, each taking one of the many escape routes that then is blocked off for all future characters. This means you can, for instance, use the hacker in your initial run through the base, while the timer is still low and enemies are weaker, to unlock all the doors. That way the engineer on your next run can come in and repair a device inside a locked door that after another character can come in and use to escape, in just one example. The mix of meta and transient strategic decisions here are amazing, where if you find good loot on one run, you could save it for all of your future characters. And even if you die during a simulation, you can use the points you have garnered from that run to upgrade and buy equipment for the next run initially. It's such a fascinating and addictive gameplay loop that only gets more and more interesting when you add on the fact that no two runs through the simulation are the same, where one might include a new hidden location that suddenly has been opened up, and another where the power is off when you first arrive and you need to fix it. Each system and mechanic of the game, in Mooncrash, even more so than the base game, comes together into a harmonic ensemble that no other games have really managed to recreate for me. And that's not even to mention the amazing lore, graphics, architecture, and mystery that you can find in both Prey and its DLC. This is a science fiction and horror lover's dream come true, all built in a world that rewards you the more you put into it. And really, there are so many more specific things I could point out here as well that prove why Prey is so special. But I think a lot of that magic comes from discovering it for yourself. Discovering how to use your weapons in genius ways, discovering the secrets of what happened on board the space station Talos 1, and discovering why Prey is the single most underrated video game of all time. This game deserves so much more than it got on its initial release. And while a cult following has begun to form for this truly special title, I cannot stress enough how much you need to give it a shot before you die, if you haven't. For some of you watching, you might be asking yourselves after an introduction like that, what exactly is an immersive sim anyways? And what do I mean when I say all games should be one? Well, before I explain what they are and how every game can benefit, let me give you a quick example from a title I've been loving that perfectly encapsulates how much you can improve a genre just by tweaking things a little bit. And it'll give us a solid foundation of what I'm talking about with immersive sims as well. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. You see, what surprised me most about this game is that despite having amazing characters, writing, music, and sound design, none of those are what won me over. It's a fantastic game, by the way, I highly recommend it, but the real reason I love it so much is actually because there's something this game does that elevates it far above its main competition, that being Uncharted and Tomb Raider, which both do similar things that are great in their own right. However, it's the design of the newest Indiana Jones game that makes it shine. A focus not just on action-adventure tropes, but on the things that make immersive sims great as well. Everywhere you walk in game, any location you go, there are countless items everywhere you can pick up and use or investigate. Numerous ways to sneak into hard-to-reach places, and ledges to swing your trusty whip on to climb up. You can don disguises to get into enemy territory undetected, pick up small notes on the ground that spawn entire hour-long side quests, or with your own eyes piece together environmental puzzles that unlock secrets surrounding the game's story. Whereas most encounters in, say, an Uncharted game would see you oscillating between one linear set piece to the next with some high action sequences in between, Indiana Jones has no problem taking its time, slowing things down. But with this slower pace almost ironically also comes an even more engaging and thought-provoking design. Instead of just mindlessly shooting at enemies in a big forest while action music plays, most of the fights for Indy play out like small scraps at a bar, where you will be running through the environment frantically looking for shovels, hammers, or even food to whack your adversaries over the head with. It's a combat system that relies more on the fly problem solving rather than raw FPS prowess, and results in a game that makes you as the player think about your surroundings to solve problems, instead of just mindlessly shooting enemies before yet another cutscene unfolds. In fact, half the time you were playing the Great Circle, you were doing nothing more than slowly traversing around rooms, looking for clues, picking up keys and fiddling with them in your hands to find symbols, or writing down notes in a real-world journal to keep track of puzzle objectives. Or in other words, while many other action-adventure titles make you feel like a badass explorer, the Great Circle really makes you feel it, if that makes sense. It's the difference between seeing the Great Pyramids of Giza up close in first-person perspective as Indiana and looking for a way to sneak in yourself, and having a map marker leading you the whole way through with an annoying companion shouting in your ear the whole time. And it leads to moments like picking up a bottle off a shelf and throwing it at an enemy to cause a distraction, or crawling through an entire Nazi base camp without even being detected once, on edge the entire time. When you have game design focused around agency like this, you wind up with something really immersive that you just don't get in standard action-adventure titles like Uncharted, Tomb Raider, or even God of War. So much so that I remember multiple times playing Indiana Jones and getting so swept up in it all that I'd slow my gait and take in the sights around me like the Vatican, all because the world felt so real. As funny as it sounds, being able to pick up every piece of bread sitting on a table and throwing it at Nazis' faces makes everything better than even this. And yeah, I know this looks cooler, but trust me, if you actually sit down and engage these games for a couple of hours, the experience of actually playing Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is in a league of its own. An immersive sim-like game masquerading as an action-adventure. And the thing is, it's a perfect example of why every game should be an immersive sim, or at least borrow some elements of this highly underrated genre of games. Because even a somewhat mediocre implementation of immersive sim staples leads to a game that in many ways is just better, in my opinion. After playing The Great Circle, in comparison, Uncharted, Tomb Raider, God of War, and so many other games in a similar vein just feel like they're missing something. Not that they're bad by any means, by the way. They're fantastic in their own right, just lacking a special magic that Indiana Jones managed to encapsulate perfectly. The type of design that once you see it, once you experience it, you realize just how much games without it are missing. Almost similar to, say, playing at 120 frames per second on a high-end PC and then trying to enjoy 30 FPS games on a console. Impossible once you've opened that can of worms. Or said more straightforwardly, simply by incorporating design principles that are the cornerstone of immersive simulation games over the past decades, we can instantly make many games so much more than they already are. But I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, aren't we? After all, what is an immersive sim, really? And how exactly do they make games better? It feels like it's impossible for me to go even one video without mentioning immersive sims. And that's because, in my opinion, they are so good on a conceptual and gameplay level that practically any title ever would benefit from pulling elements from them. But you see, while games like Ultima Underworld or System Shock before the year 2000 were instrumental for immersive sim games in the genre, it was Deus Ex, from developer Ion Storm, which not only for the first time reached the masses, but changed games forever. For those of you who have never played, Deus Ex, especially the original game from 2000, is all about conspiracy, stealth action, RPG elements, and what the team called problems, not puzzles. And that's a key quote to pull from, because the true legacy of Deus Ex lies in its design. Playing as JC Denton, a nano-augmented agent of the UN anti-terror group UNITCO, the plot weaves together themes of shadowy organizations, global pandemics before they were popular, and sinister hidden agendas. It was the perfect style of story to warn us about government distrust and misinformation that now runs rampant. And at the time, it stood as a testament that games could not only craft truly complex and interwoven stories, but that they could have something meaningful to say about our real lives, too. But for as influential as the story on offer here was, essentially predicting the future 20 years before it happened, the true crowning achievement is once again, as I said, its design. Rather than place a majority emphasis on shootouts, bombastic set pieces, or intricate puzzle designs, Deus Ex aimed to provide a different type of experience. One where every single challenge you come across has multiple solutions, unending ways to approach it, all surrounded by truly masterful level design. For example, during one mission where JC Denton must infiltrate the Brooklyn Naval Shipyard, players are given numerous ways to approach the objective. Some might opt to sneak their way through the guard posts at the main gate, while others will venture into the hidden sewer passageways below, full of traps. Some others might take a full frontal combat approach, wielding explosive charges and lots of ammo. And the most daring players of all might even try to hack their way through each section of the facility, using high-tech gadgets to find secret tunnels behind destructible walls, or looking through the camera systems to study guard routines. Missions and design like this is what makes Deus Ex, and the immersive sim genre as a whole, special. It's a game that threw out all the preconceived notions and conceptions of what games should be, and expanded upon and perfected the formula that titles like Ultima and System Shock started. It had beautiful city skylines, brutalist architecture, and a setting that was immediately recognizable and unique. And for my money, immersive sims were truly solidified here. Not only by record sale numbers, but by a game that showed just how much more complex and interesting game design could be, even with a high budget. And for my money, Deus Ex and the principles it instills of problems, not puzzles, is genius. So many games even nowadays try to focus on random puzzles or shooting galleries that, while fun, don't actually make us think. Most games have puzzles with set solutions, combat encounters that boil down to nothing more than pattern recognition. But even back in 2000, Deus Ex fully embraced the idea of putting the power in the player's hands, allowing them to tackle every situation they encountered however they saw fit, all packed alongside a story with real choice and consequence, NPCs with extremely intelligent AI and routines that made the environments feel alive, and a story that keeps you on the edge of your seat and somehow almost perfectly predicted the future. For a lot of people, they likely wouldn't put something like Deus Ex on a list like this. Maybe they would pick System Shock or Ultima Underworld instead. But in my opinion, not only did Deus Ex leave a profound mark on many of my favorite developers in the future, like Arcane with Prey, or some others that we'll talk about upcoming on this list, but I also think that immersive sims and their design will continue to get more and more popular as the average gamer becomes more hardcore. Until one day there's a golden age of sorts where every game will